What's up, everybody? Welcome to What's Up, the show where we talk all things energy. We'll share some stories, maybe share some laughs, give you the information you need to make informed energy choices. My name is Colin Adkins, and I'm joined by my fellow community energy advisors and Cornell Cooperative Extension educators working on NYSERDA's Community Energy Engagement Program, Danielle Salisbury and Sean Welch. Through this program, local community energy advisors in 10 regions across the state help residents and businesses reduce their energy consumption and energy costs and make informed energy decisions. This week, we wanted to get into a topic that it's so important to our health, our comfort, and our energy bills. It's the materials that make up your home and the insulation that keeps you comfortable. This topic quickly becomes much trickier and bigger than you might expect. So we brought in a little bit of help. This week is Stephen Stuart, former sustainability analyst for the Sullivan County Office of Sustainability. He's been associated with the Sullivan Alliance for Sustainable Development since the organization first began. And in fact, he served as the organization's executive director for 3 years. He's a lifetime practitioner of energy and sustainability work. He applies this work and his passion to these buildings that he's been involved with throughout his career and his personal life. So welcome, Stephen.
So Stephen, welcome to the conversation. Welcome to What's Up, and thank you for entertaining this today. And I'm very happy to have you.
Thanks, Sean. I'm thrilled to be with one of my most favorite community organizations, Cornell Cooperative Extension. Your CCE is that lifelong education and teaching platform that we so need in all aspects of our community life. So thank you.
Well, we appreciate your time. And Steve, so we'll jump right into it for lack of a better, lack of wasting time here. So
take a deep dive.
Right. So, materials and energy efficiency work is something that's always, you and I have had a lot of conversations kind of off the cuff over the years about, and I think it's a really interesting topic. Especially from the standpoint of like, once you get involved with doing a project, you don't realize that you have some choices with the materials that you use. And when we think about what's in our walls and what's in our building envelopes and the walls and stuff, even in the interior walls, we really have a lot of choices when it comes to the electricity in the materials that we have to use for our electric work and our plumbing, even our HVAC. Once you pick your system and everything, it's really kind of like there's a method, and then there's, you got to do what you got to do as far as what goes in the walls. But when it comes to energy efficiency work and insulation and air sealing, we do have some choices. And that's what I hope we can, we talk about today, choices that, when it comes to the materials we're looking at, we want to, of course, pick the safest and the most efficient materials so we can have the most comfortable indoor air environments that we can live and play in. But my experience is that all these systems have a priority in the home. We don't really have many choices though when it comes to what we pick, but the inner workings of those walls beyond the sheetrock, we do have, some choices. So we're going to dive right in. I'm going to do some screen sharing and we'll go through some stuff. But I think really, number one, Stephen, can we just talk and preface this conversation a little bit about how heat moves in our buildings? The 4 different ways that heat moves.
Sure. So first of all, just to back up a little bit about materials.
Sure.
We have seen buildings go through a huge evolution from the stone structures that we used to build that were not very airtight. But once the fire inside warmed up that stone, it was pretty warm. To our stick-built buildings, log homes first in this country, and then standard 2x4 framing, balloon framing. And then we got into the concept of insulation. And some of the first insulations were fiberglass and cellulose. And then our technology post-World War found us with a glut of oil and petroleum products, so we started making building materials, siding and insulations out of petroleum products, and fabric coverings, wall coverings, and the carpets, and the furniture that we sit on, and our sheets and clothing. And we started to find some problems with that. Cancer rates started to go up, asthma rates started to go up. And now we're kind of in an evolution of how do we get back to natural building materials, which, by the way, also have, so we're in this crisis. We have about less than 10 years now to really seize our greenhouse gas emissions and draw them down, so that if we do want to have a livable planet. So when we're building or remodeling, we have to keep in mind the embodied carbon, the greenhouse gas emissions, and the global warming potential of our building materials. So there's a huge movement in the architectural world and in the engineering world to go back to natural building materials, more cellulose insulation, more wood fiber board insulation. And we're finding that we also are able to control moisture better in our homes, and also we have better indoor air quality. So that being said, heat. Heat is one of those things that it can travel by conduction, radiation. Help me out here.
We got, right?
Conduction, radiation,
convection, and infiltration are the other.
Infiltration.
Yeah.
Yes. So the examples of that, conduction is when you put a cooking pan on a stove, that heat is being conducted from the fuel source, whether it's an electric burner or a gas burner, to the pan, and then that's transferred to the food. Convection is, we see that with the kind of weather that is coming up the coast. It's how the warm energy is traveling to the colder outside edges of that storm system, and it happens in our houses too. Our walls and ceilings and floor are typically the colder spots. So convection, if you could see air currents, you would see the warm air rising. It reaches the ceiling, which is, its boundary. It falls, it runs along the wall, and it's losing heat as it drops to the floor. And when it hits the floor, which is the coldest spot, it starts that whole convection cycle again. Radiation, sit by your window on a sunny day and you'll feel radiation.
Right.
And infiltration is what happens when heat energy moves through a wall. And it can move either way, because one of the laws of thermodynamics says that air moves from warm to cold. So in the wintertime, if that warm air that you've heated, to keep your house comfortable, it has a natural tendency to move toward the walls, which is the cold spot, and then out through the walls. And in the summertime, it's just the opposite. That hot, moist air outside is trying to drive through the wall to your nice, cooled, air-conditioned space inside your house. So that's infiltration. And it moves through tiny cracks and crevices in the walls if the house hasn't been properly air sealed.
And that is an important aspect of insulation work and energy efficiency work, is air sealing. And a lot of times I use the phrase out talking to folks, and it doesn't occur to me, people don't know what that means. So could you, air sealing versus installations, they're not the same thing, right?
No, they're definitely not the same thing. And there's a lot of talk and theories that air sealing is the most important aspect, because that is what stops your air flow, that warm air moving to cold air through your walls. So air sealing is a process, and it can be either very simple or very complex, depending on how you want to do it. And it can be done through your sheathing. Typically, we clad our houses with oriented strand board or plywood sheets. And one method of air sealing there is simply to caulk around those seams and air seal. If you've ever, if you've, one of our most effectively air sealed homes actually is a modular home. And the reason for that is because that home has to travel down a road and stay in one piece to get to its final home site. So when they build a modular home, they glue and screw not only the sheetrock to the studs, but the exterior sheathing is glued and nailed to the studs. So that glue helps form a good air seal.
Right.
So paying attention to how you fix, so every home, Sean, you talked about, the things that are inside the walls, our plumbing and our wiring chases. And that's a process of where, the plumber or the electrician is drilling holes through the bottom plate of a wall or the top plate to get that wiring from floor to floor. Then they're going through the stud walls to move that wire, throughout the room. And unless those are sealed, that's an excellent channel for airflow to enter your walls and actually help pull that warm air from the inside through the wall. And in the wintertime, just the opposite, or summertime, just the opposite. Pull that, it's a principle that we call a stack effect.
Right.
And that's the principle where, warm air, heat rises, and it starts out in your basement or your crawl space, and it finds all those holes that are in the floor, where the plumbing comes up, where the drain comes down, where the wires go up into the stud cavities. And if those aren't sealed, it just continues to pull that warm, moist air up through your house and out the roof. And it wastes a lot of energy. It can lead to moisture buildup in the walls, and which leads to unhealthy indoor air quality.
Yeah, and we try to encourage folks, there's you've always got an opportunity to air seal if you're going to do like a home renovation project, but there may be opportunities to air seal right now. Like if you went to your basement and you see some of those penetrations that you were speaking about, you can plug those holes up with a couple different products that are on the market. You can caulk them. You can use the gap foams. Or if you've got insulation around, you can use that old pieces of insulation can fit in a lot of those holes, right? So there's always an opportunity to air seal, because a lot of the homes in the Mid-Hudson Valley that I talk to folks about are you're dealing with a home that's already built. So you don't have that, open wall cavity to kind of just look at and really get in there and plug. So you kind of got to look at these opportunities to air seal, right?
Right. And that's one of the benefits of a home energy audit. The blower door is that diagnostic testing device that tells you where the air leaks are in your home. And you can find some really big ones that you didn't even know existed around your windows, at the floor, where your cove molding and your floor trim meets the wall on the floor. And those are pretty easy things to fix with a good quality caulking compound.
Yep. Yeah. Really good points. Really good points. And I think it just does expand upon that point that I just wanted to make, that air sealing is different than insulation. And it's usually the first step before you get into putting in your insulation. So you
exactly.
want, if you've got penetrations in that wall, that they're sealed up prior to putting in an insulation product.
Right.
All right, great. Well, I think that's a really good explanation. And before we get into this, the next thing I really want to kind of just talk with you about is some materials. We'll actually look at a couple different materials in a national extension chart that we got from one of our sister cooperative extensions. And I just want to explain, because R value is important. R value, Stephen, is that it's a measure of the thermal resistance that we're going to have when it comes to each material. And could you speak a little bit about R value? And I just want to just break it down so we know, so folks know what they're looking at when they're looking at these products, and what R value actually kind of means.
Well, yes, R value definitely is the it's the measure. R for resistance. It's the measure of what or how effective a material is, whether it be wood, fiberglass, cellulose, foam, how effective that is of allowing heat to transfer through it. So the higher the R value, and it's usually defined as R value per inch of insulation.
Really good point.
So the higher the R value per inch, the less likely it is that heat will pass through that insulation. It doesn't stop it, but it slows it down. It's like having a large diameter colander and a small sieve colander, and you pour a bucket of water through it. It's going to go quicker through that large diameter colander as opposed to a fine mesh sieve.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a measure of how quickly heat energy will move through a material.
Yeah, and and when you're looking, if you're doing a project, or you're looking at materials, that per inch is a big proponent of this whole discussion, because it's gonna give you your total R value if you add those, what your wall cavity is up, and then that number that's associated with that material as far as the R value goes. You end up with, it's not just the per inch, right? You're going to measure that by how deep the wall is, the density of the wall.
And you also then add on, what is your interior cladding? Is it 1/2 inch sheetrock, 5/8 inch sheetrock? Is it a solid board wall? Is it board and batten? Then you also have to add in the sheathing on the exterior, and what type of sheathing that is, and whether or not there's exterior insulation, continuous insulation on the exterior.
Because wood has an R, they all have R values, right? They all provide some thermal resistance for the space. So they all.
And the one R value that we typically tend to forget about is the R value of the stud, the wall stud itself. And
yeah,
we have to factor that in, and then we're talking about the R value of the entire assembly, the entire wall. And that sometimes you can lose up to 25% of a insulation value, depending on how many studs, how many headers, how many cripple studs or double studs that you have in a wall.
Really good point, and one that not everybody always thinks about when you're looking at these projects too.